Good morning, everybody. John Spiokla here from GAI Insights, giving you the Gen AI news briefing, rating your news essential, important, or optional, putting thoughts in your head, time in your day. We have Kevin Petrie today. Welcome, Kevin. Great to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Tech wizard Adam Rappaport from Down Under. My co-founder Paul Byer and Ankash Handa. Good to have you, Ankash. Okay. We have some interesting news today, different things on algorithms, new models, and so forth. Akash, please start us out with the first one.
Sure, thanks, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from Cohere, and they have introduced Command A with maximum performance, minimal compute.
And great response times. What do you think here, Adam?
I think this is probably optional news. It's important to consider some of the things that they really emphasize in terms of where they compete, in terms of performance, both in terms of getting for a certain amount of performance how much compute you need, as well as the latency, both sending to the model as well as getting the responses back. And that's where they really are focusing and showing that they outperform some of the models from companies like OpenAI. But there, as it says, it's on par with GPT-4o and DeepSeek v3, which at this point is kind of second tier with 4.5, I think, and Grok and a few of even Anthropic Claude 3.7. So this is probably optional news. It's good to see the Coheres continuing to push, and I think they will carve out a niche for themselves in those places where the fast inference times and the performance improvements really matter to people.
Yeah. So we got optional news here. Kevin, where do you come down on this?
I agree with Adam. I think optional. I think it underscores trends we already understand are underway, which is the model race is competitive. It's cutthroat, efficiency improvements and performance gains, and that's all great. But we were already aware of these trends, so I don't think there's news there for the AI leader.
All right, Paul, we're screaming toward optional.
Yeah, and I think the important thing here also, what we talked about here, is this is closed model that doesn't have a UI. They're just the model itself here. So they're really competing with the open source ones as well. And they're very, very focused on the enterprise. So I think you're seeing them and contextual AI and others continue maturity of their roadmap for enterprise features, which is very different than the Anthropics and OpenAIs that do have a UI and continue to push the end user feature, but clearly optional.
All right, optional it is. Ankash, next, please.
Okay, the next one that we have for today comes from Luma AI, and they are breaking the algorithmic ceiling in pre-training with inductive moment matching.
Yeah, what do you think of this, Kevin? Very interesting. New statistical methods to improve efficiency and performance. What do you think?
Very interesting. I took some notes here because they're using a lot of big words. So Luma has a new technique called inductive moment matching. And this applies to diffusion models, which specialize. DALL-E is a great example in creating images and video. And so what they're saying is that they can improve the efficiency of samples that are used for pre-training, and they can also improve the quality of those samples. So diffusion models work and train by putting a bunch of noise into a sample set and then taking the noise out. So this is a way to do that more efficiently. And the upshot is that diffusion model vendors can now pre-train their models more efficiently with less compute. Cool stuff. I think that there will be data scientists who read this with a high level of fascination. I don't think AI leaders need to spend much time on this. I would say it's optional because ultimately pre-training of diffusion models is not something that the average chief AI officer is going to be doing, or his or her team in a Fortune 2000 company. I think this is really more news for the diffusion model vendors. So I would say optional.
Okay, we got one vote for optional here. What do you think, Al?
Yeah, I think Kevin's got it about right there. The one thing I will call out is, and we were looking yesterday at the landscape of the text, image, and video vendors and what they produce, and Luma is right up there among the most used video vendors. So this, we need to start recognizing when there's news like that this is algorithmic innovation from someone who's leading in a space. So it could be a real competitive edge for them. But for our leader, certainly now, What'll be relevant is when they announce their next model, and it's basically text to video real time, basically because of what they've done here. But at the moment, this is not a product; it's a breakthrough, and it's optional news.
But yeah, and Adam, I might just add the the article that you highlighted yesterday that GAI highlighted as essential reading about the market indicators on the model race. That was pretty interesting, and it just shows that the switching costs are pretty low for companies. So you can have a new entrant that could come in and upset the apple cart, and the gorillas like Google don't necessarily have an advantage in that market. If you look at what DeepSeek did within a matter of a few weeks.
Yeah, well, I would let me make the case for important on this one, because I think this algorithm, as I understand it, could be they're doing inference very early in the steps, and then they're checking whether or not the statistical properties of the inputs are similar to the phenomenon, and that's a huge difference. And as you say, this is a market leader, and for me, important, is like I think if you're an AI leader, I think this whole notion of what's going to happen to images, especially, but anything in real time and distributed, and this goes to all that. I don't know. I mean, I could live with optional, but this is pretty important. And the other thing,
I don't know how they could read this article, though. It's an important innovation, but this article is not digestible. It's not written in a way that the vast majority of the people would be able to understand. Even feeding it into an AI, it's still really hard to wrap your head around the innovation here. If someone was just like, there have been 2 ways to do this, and someone just came up with a 3rd way, I'd be like, okay, cool. But it doesn't really say that, even though that's what it is.
All right, I'm going to ask Paul, but I can guess what his outcome's going to
be. Yeah, no, I'm optional, but I do think it's a really important thing, though, here is we have image enhancement, which I think in our monkey brains, we always think image is different than data, but the computers, these are just zeros and ones, right? So, Ankaj, if you scroll down here we have the algorithm innovation and enhancing images stuff here. I don't know if that's going to be any different, Kevin, on data. So when I have a massive amount of data that's got noise and everything else in here, what's the difference of image enhancement or data enhancement with high confidence here? So I think this idea that we continue to get the robots to fill in edges of what we want is an important trend, but this article's optional.
And a couple of weeks ago, we actually saw someone effectively doing text-to-text with diffusion models, right? So this could actually have the diffusion models end up passing the GPTs in terms of the architecture, like Transformer could end up getting beaten by this, not just the image stuff.
All right, optional it is.
Leaning towards important, weren't you, John?
I'm feeling democratic today.
Adam, I feel so much better because we were starting to really beat up essential articles, and now we're back to really beating up optional ones. So we're back to our old selves.
Yeah, no, but I mean, this whole thing about the first part of this article that starts there hasn't been enough focus on algorithmic innovation. I totally agree with. I mean, that's where I think a lot of the juice is going to be. And you have, idiots out there, claiming stupid things like we're never going to have to write a line of software code again, and it's just, and a bunch of people, get cranked up in that whole conversation, which to me is irrelevant. People are using these complex models. They're doing difficult cognitive tasks. Sometimes, it's a balance of human and machine. Sometimes the machines can take over fully. And then you look at, what's going to drive the improvement. Algorithmic innovation, I think and architectural innovation, how do you chop up the problem, I think are going to be 2 ways that we're going to see vast improvements, along with the chips just getting better and better and better. Anyway, we're good. Optional. Here we go. Next up, Coach.
Okay, the next one comes from Anthropic, and they talk about auditing language models for hidden objectives.
Yeah, wow, this is so much fun and kind of weirdness. So here we have. I like these. I like the way they write at Anthropic. They start off with King Lear here and his 3 daughters. But the whole notion of how are we going to audit these models, and are they? This is trying to solve the issue of how do we approach when a model might be hiding its activity due to the way it was trained, especially with reinforcement learning. So when we saw the other day, that if you in chain of thought reasoning, if you over discipline the model, it is more likely to lie in a more sophisticated way. That was my memory. Yeah. And so here we've got, what's that?
Alarming. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yes. And then it's like, okay, if that's true, then how do we create audit techniques so we can find that out, right? First of all, it's kind of weird that we have to worry about that, but now that we're worried about that, and this is, I found this a very informative article, well written, I thought, for a complex subject. And they were able to, they trained a model to try to hide its behaviors on 52 misalignments, and the audit approaches of, they had 4 audit teams, red team, blue team on this thing. They had 4 audit teams that were, 3 of them were able to find out, in fact, the hidden motive that the model was trying to hide. And, I thought that this didn't make me feel comfortable that we've got the problem solved, but I thought it was a worthwhile investigation into how we might approach the problem. And also to just highlight the problem that, I think our conception of what these things do is not correct. And I don't know. And when we say stuff like, hey, it's just a stochastic parrot, it's like, no, when it's big and complex and has agency and it has emergent behaviors, it's not a stochastic parrot. If it's a stochastic parrot, it's a stochastic parrot at such a level of complexity, we can't predict its outcomes, and it has surprising emergent behavior. So saying it's a stochastic parrot to me is a ridiculous, and it's got coherent, unanticipated behavior. So just saying it's kind of a random walk is a really stupid way to think about the problem. These are complex things that have value, that come out with outcomes that we have to manage. And it's also got agency within the context of the model. So anyway, I think this is a much better way to think about it, that we're in dialogue with these models trying to figure out what their motives are. Anyway, enough about that philosophical approach. But I think from a management control and a management organization standpoint, this is important. So anyway, I was going to give it important. What do you guys?
I would say essential, actually, for a lot of the reasons you talked about. It's important for companies to be pretty vigilant about the risks associated with these models that can start to think on their own and be devious on their own. And it does have a lot of similar themes as the OpenAI article that came out earlier this week. I think the term in your summary was unnerving, which I agreed with, in terms of what these folks are introducing. So I think essential. I think, and it's also interesting that on the one hand, I appreciate the transparency from the model vendors, but on the other, why aren't they trying to solve these problems before they put things out in the market?
Yeah, right. What a concept.
Yeah, thanks for the warning, but where's the fix?
Nothing wrong with teach a little kid how to use an AK-47. Right. So we got important, essential, and Paul, I'm going to you. I think you're going to be an anchor to windward, as we say.
I'm an important. I think the conversation we just had was good, but important.
Okay, Adam.
I was between important and optional, and I've certainly supporting important now. It's important to think about. It's sort of in some ways at the same time research that's expanding on the point that was made earlier in the week in some ways, and sort of deepening the understanding of it, which is helpful. But we're probably going to see a lot more about this in the near future.
All righty, important it is. Ankaj, next.
Okay, the next one that we have comes from Microsoft, and it talks about the new Copilot for gaming.
New Copilot for gaming. Very interesting. Yeah, and it helps you set the games. As I understand, it helps you set the games up. Does a bunch of support in terms of making you better at playing the game. What do you think, Adam?
I think this is optional news, and it is pretty cool. I'll say why I think it might be important as well as you sort of look into other industries. But even from this picture, it's not quite clear to me. And this is not an actual gameplay. This is like an artist's interpretation of what it might be, first of all, which is why it's probably optional. But I'm assuming from this that you would be using voice, right? So you're playing the game. You're not pulling out a keyboard and typing. to the AI. You're having a conversation with it, and you can see in that little picture, he's saying, okay, I've got the wood. What do I do now? And the little heads-up display says, okay, you have to open your inventory and drag it over to the crafting table. So it's going to be great for people. In that podcast, they discuss a little bit about what this can do in terms of leveling the playing field in a way that the game developers can't, which is that different people define for themselves what it means to enjoy the game. And some people love how hard those puzzles are. And some people are like, this is slowing me down. And they abandon a game and never come back to it because they couldn't get past some challenge. So to really give the user a little more freedom around having something that can help them, and to what degree, is pretty powerful. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. Tangentially, imagine this is an AI chatbot on any site, right? This is that future where you have your assistant real time while you're interacting on the screen. And this is one of the first, I guess, at least prototypes we've seen since almost a year ago, when OpenAI was showcasing, talking to the computer while they're using it, kind of thing. And that modality of a voice that you interact with, that's talking you through what's on the screen for education, onboarding, enablement, all of those things. This is a look at that future from Microsoft and Xbox for gaming specifically, but it isn't even real footage yet. So it's a bit of a vaporware sort of cool thing that's coming. So I thought it was still optional news.
All right. So concept essential, but this article optional. Kev, you're fine with that?
Yes, I think it's essential for my 11-year-old because he gets very upset when our 16-year-old beats him at various video games. So this can coach him through those blockers. But I think optional for the AI leader.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I wonder what the future, if you believe as I do that you must have frustration to learn, then it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in learning. Oh, where are you?
That's true. Yeah.
I'm optional, John, but Adam, you just heard John's theory of teaching for 12 years at Harvard. He must have frustration. There's not enough frustration or snark in his class.
Well,
You're
snark's
not learning hard enough.
a different and important dimension, but frustration. Look, your brain's like your muscles. You got to strain them to grow new things, right?
That's true. I tell my kids that.
Just don't use that with your wife, John.
Oh, don't worry. We're well down the path on that one. Not to worry. Okay, we're going to go optional on this one. Okay, next, please.
Yes. So the next one comes from Quantum Black by McKinsey, and it talks about the state of AI, how organizations are rewiring to capture value.
Yes. Can I just make one editorial point here? When they have the cameo appearances by their partners, saying platitudinous, vacuous things, I don't think it helps them. But anyway, other than that, Kevin, what'd you think of the article?
I did find more. Actually, if you don't mind stopping you right there, Ankush, I did find more insights outside those boxes. I tend to agree with you. So overall, I thought this was. I thought it was a gold mine. At Bark, we believe hugely in survey data and what it can tell you. I thought that there are a lot of really interesting findings here about the pace and the best practices related to AI adoption on a lot of different levels: technology, people, and process. This particular chart I thought was pretty interesting, which is helping people understand the degree to which they are centralizing and going with a top-down approach to AI, which appears to be more of a best practice, especially when it comes to risk and governance. That's a big point that I've been making and we've been making in our research, while still fostering innovation and experimentation on a decentralized basis within the business units. So overall, very good stuff, very useful views. It's interesting to see the level of CEO involvement in AI governance, in AI strategy, and how that influences the performance and the results. We're not competitive with McKinsey, but I will nitpick and say, so we've got some Bark research coming out, I think next week, about data management to support AI. And what we tend to do is look at the subset of folks that we think are doing the right things by addressing 7 different types of cross-functional programmatic steps. And the number of folks that we think are doing all the right things hasn't gone up much. It's about 1/5 of overall AI adopters. So there are ways in which there's a certain cohort in the market that's leading the trends and doing all the right things. And then there's a long tail of slower adopters. And that particular bifurcation might not be showing up in this particular data. With all that said, I find it to be essential. I think it's a really good view of what's happening in the market and how AI leaders can craft their own strategies.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at this chart. In particular, there's a book, I think it's from the 1960s, called Organizations in Action by two HBS professors, Jay Lorsch and Paul Lawrence and Lorsch. It's a big deal in strategy and organization. It basically, laid out the different ways that organizations change based on what environment they're in, right? And the kind of patterns you see. And here, I think if we look from risk and compliance to adopted AI solutions, where centralization is, hub model versus, decentralized makes a lot of sense, right? Risk and controls,
Yeah.
the whole enterprise that should be centralized. Hey, applications might be, should closer to the edge. So I think this is, very interesting data. Just some of the interesting data. Some of the other stuff in here, I thought, larger companies over $500 million in sales are doing, more. The CEO involvement, I was very surprised by. And, it's making this very important point that if you're going to try to, there's data that backs up the following point. Wherever the nexus of control is in your AI effort is going to define the environment of value. And what I mean by that is that, if you have to redo a whole process, well, then the reporting relationship has to be above that whole process. You know what I mean? So I can't expect by doing islands of automation and customer service and outbound sales and logistics, each of those, that if I put the authority down there, I'm not going to get a reinvention of the whole process for it because nobody has either the incentives or the authority to make that happen. So as we get, put another way, as we get to more transformational activity, the control point in organizations is likely to go higher or should go higher. So it relates to your aspiration. It's got great data, I think, on the granularity of how that works by function, by industry, and so forth. So essential for me as well. What do you think, Adam, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, John, just on your riff a little bit, I agree with essential. I think one, everything you said, I agree with essential. Two, there's good graphics here. Three, I think the point you were just making, I think it's really interesting, Kevin, when you think about an wins-intensive industry with two firms taking a very different approach on tops down or bottoms up. So you can see a Deloitte and KPG fighting it out in this wins-intensive industry, one doing very much a tops-down approach in their kind of drive towards AI native processes, another one doing very much a bottoms-up node-based island stuff here. And, John, to your point, have very different competitive cultures and offerings. And, particularly when you get the acceleration of the scale of these AI intelligence processes, you might have two firms that take those two different roads and look radically different 3 years down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we at Harvard Business School with the IT area, we did a lot of work on this. And, one of the critical things is where's the risk sit? And then what's the nature of interdependence of the productive capacity of the organization? So you look at an airline, right? You have to go functional all the way to the top because the interdependence sits at the whole network, right? I can't just fix Atlanta and then have an impact on the airline. But if I'm running a food business, maybe I can just fix Atlanta, right? If that's where the production and consumption is. Anyway, yeah, I think the other thing, Paul, is I think it interacts with how mature an organization is. In the early days, you might start bottoms up to spread the knowledge, but then when you want to do true, in our EAT model, educate, apply, transform, and the educate, apply part, it might be decentralized, but in the transform part, you really have to look at what's the nature of your productive process and where does the interdependence and where does that sit organizationally and incentive-wise, and then put the control point there.
And the last end that we're riffing this lot. And John, I just compared then also the historic culture of the organization coming up. Amazon, highly decentralized operating systems here would choke on that kind of top-down, model other than kind of risk management. So it's
well, yes, except for I bet in certain logistics functions that are highly interdependent, they'd be fine with it being centralized. Or Rufus, right, which goes across their whole interface, their AI agent. I bet that's highly centralized, right? So I think it's that combo. Adam, you okay with essential on this bad boy?
Yeah, I am. I think Kevin said it well. Once I started to get sucked into those those little bio things. They're sort of personal kind of
Vanity pics.
I started to get lost in there, and I also I pegged it down to important in the pregame, partly because it's a bit disjointed. There's a lot of information in there, but there's no thesis. They don't really bring it together at all. I mean, it felt like they were each given one headline.
Yeah.
Right. Early days, AI is shifting, AI use continues, and then they wrote that section. So it was a little incoherent for me, but a ton of great information in there, so I wouldn't object to an essential rating.
Yes. What's that old joke? A camel is a horse designed by committee. This is definitely a camel.
This was a dromedary.
I don't know what a dromedary is, but okay.
It's a camel, but with two humps. Even more was the line from a horse. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. All right. Essential with caveats. Okay.
Okay, the last one that we have comes from MIT and talks about what leaders should know about bring your own AI.
Yeah, here we are. Bring your own AI. Our friends at the Center for Information Systems Research, CISR. It's still run by my friend Peter Weil. On this one, I was going to give this an important. I thought this had a bunch of interesting stuff on, how you think about the risks. This issue of bringing your own AI is absolutely essential. This is a nice article in the sense that it does acknowledge the fact that over control is not going to work. If you tell your workers not to use this stuff, it's not going to happen. It's open to multiple models, and it's I think one of Peter's strong suits, and I think it goes through the entire Center for Information Systems Research, is they're very good at governance. Peter's always been fascinated by that for the past. I've known him for, I guess, going on 45 years now. 40 years, and he's always been fascinated by IT governance. And I think he's not on this, but I think it shows in this as well. So I gave it an important, very practical stuff and stuff that's happening in organizations right now. What do you think here, Kevin?
I agree. Important. It's an essential topic, and I thought it was a thoughtful way to look at it. I'm not sure there were massive breakthroughs in how to approach the topic of BYO AI. I think that organizations need to get their arms around it pretty fast because there are a lot of powerful models out there, some built overseas, and companies need to figure out how their knowledge workers should really be using those. So critical topic, important to stay educated. I'm not sure there are big breakthrough thoughts here. So important sounds good.
Okay, we got important. I mean, I was on the fence. What do you think here, Paul?
I'm important just to reinforce the notion of BYO. I mean, we've talked, at least in my view, shadow IT is out of control. People don't have that. And we saw just a few weeks ago, Vivek in our community, who was a guest here, he took a new job at Pfizer and brought his own AI. He had a bunch of GPTs he was doing in a previous work.
Oh.
And I described those as kind of macros in Excel, and he moved that over. So that's at a simplistic level, and that will only continue. So I don't hear a lot of conversations about top-down, bottoms-up architecture we just talked about from a control standpoint. I don't hear a lot of conversations about this. So for those reasons, important.
All right, Adam, we're sprinting to the finish here. What do you think?
I'll make the quick case for essential because we did just hear in that last article about the support from the top down, and we saw from VentureBeat, I think it was last week, something like 76% of employees said that they use AI on a daily basis to help them get their job done, even in spite of not having any enterprise tools available to them. And almost half of them said they'd risk losing their job and continue to use it because it was so important to their productivity. Yeah. And that even if an AI ban was put in place, they would continue to use it because they don't know how they'd get their job done without it. So in regard to that, I feel this is just so strongly reinforcing that message, which our AI leaders have to get this week, right? Okay. They have to get it last week. They have to get on board and start having enterprise AI solutions available to their companies because they're doing it whether they want to or not. And as this very much shows, there are ways that you can do BYO AI and actually mitigate the risk of it, right?
All right.
So, especially from MIT, a big label on it as well. I could see where it would be essential.
Absolutely. Okay, essential it is. You may be. I am convinced. Anka, put that one as essential. Paul, got any announcements for Monday?
Yes, on Monday's Learning Lab, we're going to be having a group discussion on everyone's favorite models. So we're going to revisit something we did a few months ago on which ones are people using now and how's that changing behavior or not. Two other quick announcements. April 15th, MIT, massive AI summit that continues to go. And I was fortunate enough to do a Boston TEDx talk recently, and that just was published as well. So I had a lot of fun with that.
Awesome. Any news from you, Kevin, Adam? Akash?
Got 2 reports coming out, survey-based reports this month. One on observability, the other on data to support AI. A lot of themes that we're talking about here.
Wonderful.
Over to you, Ankash.
Yes, Akash, give us the top board.
Yep, coming right up. Sorry about earlier.
Survey says, I feel like Steve Harvey. Okay. All right, we got two essentials today: state of AI and bring your own AI. 1 important, 3 optionals. All right, some decent reading, especially data coming up on the weekend for our AI leaders. Have a great weekend, everybody. Look forward to seeing you Monday, I hope, at our Learning Lab, and have a wonderful AI day. Bye-bye.